listening to Champions of Care, brought to you by Oakwood Healthcare on News Talk 760 WJR. Here's Lloyd Jackson.
We all know that walking, running, and physical activity are keys to good health, but that's tough when you're experiencing foot and ankle pain. Dr. Richard Needleman is an Oakwood-affiliated orthopedic surgeon with offices in Dearborn and Canton, and he'll be talking about the latest in treatments for foot and ankle issues. We welcome him this morning to the studios of WJR and the Champions of Care. Dr. Needleman, good to see you.
Lloyd, thank you very much for having me here.
Let's get a little bit of background on your educational background, first of all. How long have you been affiliated with Oakwood, and where did you go to school?
Well, I've recently been affiliated with Oakwood since May. School's been a while ago. I did go to the University of Michigan, where I got my first degree, an undergraduate, and then to be a doctor, we have to go to medical school afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I went to medical school at the University of Vermont, and after we become doctors, we have to do training or residency programs. And to be an orthopedic surgeon, our training program's 5 years. So after 5 years of training, I was an orthopedic surgeon. So I began practicing general orthopedics in 1984. Realized that I really liked problems with the foot and the ankle, and decided after practicing for 3 years that I wanted to do additional training, which was now offered to doctors who were orthopedists. So I did an additional 1 year of training in problems of the foot and ankle, both adult and children's.
Doctor, the anatomy of the foot is so complicated. How do all the bones and muscles and ligaments and tendons function together?
There's an awful lot of bones in the foot. I don't specialize in knees anymore, where there's only 3 bones, and I don't specialize in hips anymore, and there's only 2 bones.
You had to go for the gusto, didn't you?
I specialize in feet, where there are 28 bones, and the ankle are more than 2 bones, and that's an awful lot of bones. So when people outside of medicine ask me how everything works, I say, well, it's kind of like a car. Every bone, every muscle, every tendon, everything has a role, and that's how we work. So our foot has to move up and down. It has to move in and out. We're always walking an awful lot of steps. We can run. At least we start out running, and everything seems to have a function in order to help absorb shock and help someone move on whether it's flat surfaces or uneven surfaces.
What are some of the most common issues you see in your practice?
I see a lot of sports injuries, and I see a lot of fractures. And sometimes the fractures are because of sports injuries, or sometimes the fractures occur because of automobile accidents or falls.
Now, when you talk about sports injuries that you see, what are the ones you see most often?
The most common sports injury that many of us see are the run-of-the-mill ankle sprain. I also see an awful lot of fractures. You could imagine if someone's get a cleat injury, or frequently I might see people who develop stress fractures through training, or are broken bones through collision sports.
Now, are you seeing more foot and ankle complaints as people age, or because maybe they're overweight?
Definitely, Lloyd. I see both. Older individuals still think they're young, and many older individuals are participating, whether it be in recreational sports or golf or tennis or walking. And the parts are aging, and people still want to do what they have to do, and they don't want to limp, and therefore those individuals are coming to my office. I'm also seeing individuals who probably weigh a little more than they should, and that's wear and tear itself. That's the bones and the joints can only take so much, and just like hips and knees, they can wear out.
Speaking with Dr. Richard Needleman, who's an Oakwood-affiliated orthopedic surgeon with offices in Dearborn and Canton, and we're talking about the latest treatments on foot and ankle issues. How do you assess, Dr. Needleman, treatment for a person who has a foot or ankle problem?
It's a two-way street, Lloyd. An individual will seek medical attention because they have a problem such as pain or deformity or swelling. They can't do what they would normally like to do, and everybody seems to have a particular story of how it occurred, whether it's as dramatic as a fall, or perhaps it might be a new job, or perhaps it's a new situation, a new pair of shoes. Everybody seems to have a unique situation, or they may have had problems for years, and therefore they try to summarize their numerous years of problems all in about 15 minutes. Then as a physician, we try to examine patients in a standard fashion by looking, by feeling, by checking different areas of the foot as to whether it looks right, or if it's too swollen, or where patients hurt. And after performing that basic sitting exam, I like to see my patients stand and walk around to see if they walk correctly, or to see if they limp, or to see if they hurt.
Now, do you see people who come in who have like problems with their feet, like maybe they call it pigeon-toed, but I don't know if that's correct medical term for it, but is that something that you can correct as well in your office?
Most of my patients now are adults, And the adult patient doesn't complain so much about a condition that you call pigeon-toed, or perhaps the feet might be pointing toward one another. When I was taking care of kids, which were a while back, I might see many parents bring their kids in who might be pigeon-toed. And usually I try to reassure parents and say, well, most of these pigeon-toed problems seem to correct in life, that not only do the bones grow bigger as your child gets bigger, but they go through a twisting and an untwisting, and they also go through angular changes, which are normally in growth. It's quite unusual for individuals to remain pigeon-toed later in life, and it's the very rare individual who requires a surgical procedure for pigeon-toed.
Are there some conditions that can't be treated with surgery, like that Achilles heel? Or
I see a lot of individuals who have heel problems and Achilles problems, which are very close to the heel. Most people with heel problems, such as heel pain, which is one of the most common problems that a foot and ankle doctor would see in the office, they seem to get better, but it might take 6 to 12 months. That we frequently recommend comfortable shoes, built like athletic shoes, perhaps soft inserts in the shoes, and perhaps physical therapy or stretching exercises. But Achilles are one of those problems that have really seemed to have developed more of a physician understanding in the last 15 or 20 years. If you're very much interested in athletics, you might be aware that individuals can actually rupture their Achilles tendon, which has occurred in the Olympics and in the professional ball fields, and those individuals frequently might require an operation. Although other individuals who might have Achilles problems might have it more associated with jumping sports such as basketball.
Right.
And most of the time, surgery is not necessarily indicated, and those individuals might get better, but they might be out of the action for a short time.
Now, why are foot injuries so difficult to recover from? I mean, why does it typically take such a long time?
Well, a human being has to walk. At least most of us start out walking. Until we develop afflictions later on. And because we have to walk, it isn't necessarily the proper environment to heal after an operation. And therefore, someone has to be off their feet while either their bones or their tendons heal. And even with some of the early steps, when the doctors say it's time to walk, can be fraught with deconditioning, weakness, soreness, and that does translate to quite a period of time to get back into action.
Speaking with Dr. Richard Needleman, who is an Oakwood-affiliated orthopedic surgeon with offices in Dearborn and Canton, and we're talking about orthopedic foot and ankle issues. You know, Doctor, why is it that you hear about knee and hip replacements being fairly common, but you don't hear much about ankle replacement? Can you replace an ankle?
The answer to that is we're trying. We're trying to replace an ankle. Early in my training, it was well known in the community that the hips worked pretty good. And beginning in the 1970s and in the 80s, the knees finally caught up. There have been many attempts to develop a total ankle that is just as successful as many of the knees and the hips. And the first go-around in the 70s didn't work out so well. And the second go-around in the 90s caused a resurgence of popularity of the ankle. But with this resurgence, for one thing, it's technically hard for the surgeon to do. Not everybody's a candidate. And there's all sorts of complications that arose in the 90s. There are newer ankle replacements out there. Many are in Europe. Some are in the United States. And for the right individual, it might be the right operation to do.
There are all kinds of over-the-counter aids for feet, Dr. Needleman, shoe inserts, etc. Do they really work?
I really wish I had a couple of shares of Dr. Scholl's, because they really do seem to help, and the more products out there, the easier it is for me to be a doctor. There's so much variety. They're relatively inexpensive. There have been technical advances to the shoe, so frequently these shoes come with the appliances within them.
Now, what are the best kinds of shoes to wear to prevent injury? You know, they have all kinds of shoes now that can, I don't know. I mean, they're supposed to just make everything like you're walking on a cloud, and some of them are very, very expensive as well.
And they're highly commercialized too. The advances of shoes that are comfort shoes and maybe injury prevention shoes seem to parallel the advances that have been made in athletic footwear starting in the 1970s. Many of my female patients might not like the fact that some shoes might not be so good or might cause problems, such as pointy-toed high heel shoes. So there does need to be some convincing to try to wear a shoe that looks more like an athletic shoe, with well-supportive counters, with built-in arch supports, with cushioned heels and soles that are actually even rounded to enable someone to walk with less energy and more efficiently.
What would you say to those listening right now who might be dealing with chronic foot or ankle pain?
Just like back pain, chronic foot and ankle pain seems to be particularly prevalent in individuals over the age of 50, 55. And what's most important to say without seeing patients is to try to stay healthy, stay active, wear comfortable footwear, perhaps rotate your footwear every day, always wear socks. And if you see something wrong or you feel something's not right, I usually advise seeing a foot care specialist, or at least going to your primary care physician and asking what's going on and maybe getting some x-rays.
Dr. Needleman, it was a pleasure having you here on the Champions of Care. Thank you for coming in.
Lloyd, thank you very much.
We've been speaking to Dr. Richard Needleman, an Oakwood-affiliated orthopedic surgeon with offices in Dearborn and Canton. If you're experiencing chronic foot and ankle pain, or for more information, please visit oakwood.org or call 800-543-9355, 800-543-WELL. You're listening to the Champions of Care on News Talk 760 WJR.
You're listening to Champions of Care, brought to you by Oakwood Healthcare on News Talk 760 WJR. Oakwood, we specialize in you.